So we talked last week about the Renaissance and how the Renaissance was a time of innovation in art, architecture, and in thinking, but particularly in painting. It's well worth talking a little more about the innovations that came around in the Renaissance in terms of art and painting in particular. Now look at this painting. This painting is more symbolic of the medieval period. You can see it's kind of one two-dimensional painting. It's kind of flat. It has a traditional representation of Christ. It's certainly a religious painting. This is what you might call an icon or an iconic painting. We have the icon of Jesus. You can see the cross, crucifix, and the kind of halo around him and the Latin lettering. Perhaps by our standards it would be considered somewhat simplistic. Now compare with this sculpting of Jesus. You can see Jesus here. It's full form. It's 3D. You can see this sculpting the hair right down to the anatomy, right down to the wielding of the cross. Look how the figure of Christ here is wielding the cross, almost like a warrior. And his affect and his body, the smooth marble, it's almost like a Greek god in many respects. So Christ has come to life. Again, if you were to compare it with the previous medieval image, we can see something else is going on here. This sculpting from the 16th century compares quite stark. It's quite a stark comparison you can make with the paintings of the 11th or 12th century. Or how about comparing these two pictures of Christ? Again, on the left, we can see this traditional medieval type image of Christ. Christ is held in high esteem. Christ is sitting somewhat still, looking straight ahead, the halo on his head, the crucifix around him, and the symbols and symbolism of the book he's holding. Compare on the right, where Christ is painted in full form as a man. He's not sitting in a kind of a regal position. He's sitting in a normal position as a man. This here on the right is a painting, The Head of Christ, by Rembrandt. Rembrandt is a Dutch Renaissance painter. We talked about how the Renaissance moved north to the Netherlands, to Holland, where Dutch painters were prominent during this period. And so we can see this kind of realistic portrayal. And not realistic in the sense of a realistic painting, but more realistic in the sense of Christ as a man. This is the point of humanism, the idea of a man. A man is a great piece of work. And here God, Jesus Christ, is represented as a man, as an ordinary man. It's an important point to make that Renaissance painters and thinkers were not necessarily anti-religious. Indeed, you can see these representations of Christ by Rembrandt show that he was indeed very religious. But you can see that they're very eager to bring religion, to bring God, to bring the spiritual down to the level of the ordinary person. You can see Christ here preaching by Rembrandt. You can see people are not in Middle Eastern turn of the century ancient dress. They're actually in dress from the Renaissance period. So you can see the intent here is to make Christ seem like an ordinary man, unlike the previous medieval iconic images where Christ was held in high esteem, almost an untouchable, far from an ordinary figure. Here again, Christ powerfully is portrayed as an ordinary figure. And here is a sketch by Rembrandt of Christ. You know the Christ story where Christ is led in chains before Pontius Pilate to be punished. And here again you can see the somewhat realistic, dramatic painting by Rembrandt. Christ is at his lowest point here. So it's not a representation of Christ on high, casting judgment. Christ is here beaten down as an ordinary man, a realistic depiction of the trials and the endurance that Christ undertook. And the life of Christ was certainly a feature of Renaissance painting. We can see here Christ being taken down from the cross. This is by the Italian Renaissance painter Caravaggio. You can understand why these painters studied anatomy, why they studied the body. So they get the form right, unlike the medieval painters who were less concerned with the form. And they're eager to show Christ as an ordinary person, enduring the pains of ordinary people, enduring despair, just like any other person in life. So Christ is portrayed in a humanistic sense. Here again is a painting by Caravaggio, where you can see this is the story of Christ being betrayed. Judas steps forward to kiss Christ, and the soldiers step forward to arrest Christ. And you can see the dramatically realistic portrayals of the human body. But also this Caravaggio painting is noted for the use of light and shadow. It's pretty amazing how they use light, darkness, and shadow in this painting. You can see the reflection on the soldier, the reflection on the faces of the folks involved in the struggle here. Really quite a dramatic painting and quite a marked contrast. And you can see that really these Renaissance painters thought a lot about their art, thought a lot about anatomy, the use of light, various different brushstrokes, etc. So it's certainly a revolution in painting, but also a revolution in thinking. And that's what the Renaissance, the rebirth, is all about. And finally, here is one more painting by Caravaggio. This tells the story of Paul of Sauris, who fell off his horse on the road to Damascus and was converted to Christianity. So here again is a dramatic painting, using perspective, using light and shade, using anatomy, even down to the anatomy of the animal involved. Real dramatic portrayal that sums up everything about Renaissance painting. The way these artists pioneered a new form of painting, used anatomy, used science, and also focused on religious themes, even though they had a different idea of religion, a humanistic idea.